All right, I think we're going to go ahead and get started this evening. I'd like to thank everybody for attending tonight's Suffolk U webinar. Um, just some housekeeping. If you have any questions, feel free to ask those. If you're on Zoom, you can ask those questions via chat or question and answer, and I will share those with our speaker. If you're on Facebook, please feel free to comment in the comment section, and I will share those as well. There is a little bit of a delay if you're watching on Facebook Live, so bear with us a little bit. If the question isn't answered at the time you ask, I'll certainly keep track of those and ask those at the end of Carissa's presentation. A big thank you for Carissa Isaacs, who is currently the Director of Producer Resources for Superior Farms, to speak with us tonight about Flock 54, the cram grading system, and some of the other technologies that Superior is using. With that, I'll go ahead and let Carissa go from there.
Hi, everyone. At the moment, it's not letting me share my video, but that is of just myself, but that is completely okay. More importantly is that you guys can see the screen and the PowerPoint. So we will just keep moving forward with that. I really appreciate the Suffolk Association for taking the time tonight to let us talk about different producer programs at Superior Farms. And I'm also really excited to share some of the Carcass performance traits utilizing some of our producer programs. So one second, it might work now. Oh, no, okay. Oh, Amanda, it's not letting me advance my slide either. We even tested this and it's...
Okay, let's see here. Let me see if I can change. We even tried to get technology to not be an issue and it still happens. So let's see. Okay. All right. There we go.
All right. So Superior Farms has several different producer programs that are available to the industry. The only producer program that I would say is specifically for our producer partners is the way that we have the camera grading system set up, utilizing our producer portal. Other than that, whether it be Flock 54, our barrier probiotics, our U financing, all of those are available to anybody in the industry. And really where the idea of these producer programs came from were the idea from the industry roadmap and the Hale group of how we were going to continue to make our industry viable. Any presentation that you hear in the sheep industry, you know, the buzzwords are production efficiency and profitability. And I know that I say that, especially coming from Superior Farms, more than anything. And, you know, ultimately that is what's going to make our industry viable, and collaborating with all of our industry stakeholders. And so where we have different producer programs, and we really tonight are going to focus on Flock Forward and the idea of utilizing the technology that's available to the industry, utilizing traceability from farm gate all the way to the consumer's plate, and then transformation of our industry. So the industry roadmap was looked at in 2014. We're coming up soon on 10 years, and there are still things within that roadmap that are needing to be addressed, and how we fix those. And so one of the main things through Flock Forward, I believe, is consistency of our product. And so where we start with the Flock Forward program is, of course, with, I'm going to probably say producer partners a lot tonight, but it's the sheep industry producers as a whole. Them utilizing EID tags on farm, and us utilizing that technology throughout our plant, and like I said, to the consumer. Following that through with the camera grading system and how those tie together, and then ultimately using Flock 54 genomics. So the way that we looked at our flock forward program is through a feedback loop. So like I said, it would start with the producer. It's your choice of EID and your management software, whether that is actually utilizing a computer software or that's utilizing a notebook that sits in your truck, as long as you're actually utilizing that data. That's what's most important. I don't have any judgment whether you're paying for a program, a management program, you created your own management program, or you're still doing it old school with your notebook. But as long as you're looking back at that data and you're creating benchmarks from that, that's ultimately where this entire system and success moving forward starts. From there, if you can utilize EID tags, Superior Farms can absolutely tie even more data back to you and help you with your goals and your benchmarks in your operation. So we do have EID readers at the plant. Of course, they tie to our camera grading system, which ultimately goes into our producer portal. And then you're able as a producer partner to download that data back into your management software. Or again, just utilize the producer portal to look at that data, export it into Excel, and make management decisions or understand what your performance of your lambs is. Just quickly, we do have the EID reader as lambs are unloaded into both of our facilities as of now, in Dixon and Colorado or Denver. The picture in the right-hand corner of the screen is the camera grading system. And so the EID reader is at, like I said, at the pins when they're being unloaded. All those lambs are red, and then again at the restrainer as they're going onto the harvest floor. And so as they're going onto the harvest floor, once that lamb is hung on a hook, that hook also has a specific identification number, and those two, the EID and the identification on the hook, are essentially become one, and it follows them through the entire process. So we are able to look at individual lamb performance rather than just lot performance, but we're also able to provide that to you as well. And then we're ultimately able to track those lambs from birth performance, whatever you're keeping track of, all the way through the slaughter process. Again, here's another picture of the camera. I'm sure you guys have seen this before. The camera, especially in Dixon, is nothing new, but it's important that we understand the flow and how these lambs are going through. So the blue screen that you can see is where the pictures are actually being taken. The two fluorescent lights are in between. That is the actual camera, and it's taking a picture of the back and the side and creating those algorithms that ultimately 24 hours later go into our online portal. You're able to log on with your specific user ID. And as you can see, there's several different tabs that you can choose from on what you're wanting to look at on those individual lambs or lots. So the most important thing, and I have it in bold print on here, that come from the camera is USDA yield grade, which if you are harvesting your lambs in an inspected facility, you more than likely are able to get this. Or if you are processing on your own, this is something that's also easily calculated. So as we move through the camera grading tonight and the producer portal, like I said, this is one of the only producer programs that Superior Farms has that isn't readily available, all access to all producers. But this is something that you can easily be collecting, whether you find a high school student that is meats judging in 4-H and FFA, and they want to go into the locker plant or wherever you're harvesting and they want to do measurements for you. You can easily do that all the way up to more sophisticated, the camera, but ultimately they give you all the same grades. And so please, as we talk about this, think about that, because these are all possibilities for you to look at things that are important as you're looking at your lambs on the rail. The one thing that is unique to the camera would be the calculated ovine cutability. If you're not familiar with that calculation, it's essentially boneless, closely trimmed retail cuts. And I have all of those listed on the next slide, what that refers to. Of course, the camera gives you USDA quality grade, and then it also provides projected primal cut weights. And so this is really important as these lambs are going through fab and case ready the following day after they are in the coolers, because this really helps at the plant level tell us what we can consistently give to a customer and fill our orders that way. And so, like I said, the most important thing to me currently is providing a consistent product, especially as we're in 2021, and over the last calendar year, we've improved demand by 40% in the lamb sector, and we do not want to give that up to imports. And so we want to make sure that 365 days a year, every single box, every single package that goes out to each one of our customers is consistent and up to their standards. And so these calculations and these projections really help us at the plant level provide that level of consistency. So again, the ovine cutability calculation, like I said, if we're looking at camera grading and you're looking at your report on the producer portal, the yield grade and the OCC are the most important. We want a low yield grade, preferably a 2, and we want a high OCC, the more saleable red meat that we can possibly have, or the most, excuse me. So as you can read on here, I mean, that includes obviously a lamb rack, shoulder, breast, foreshank, loin, leg, and then the flank. If we're going to look at what the portal provides you, if we look at an individual lamb, again, you're going to see that back image and side image, like I said with the blue screen. You'll also be able to see the harvest date, what day it was harvested, the lot number that it was going through the plant, what species, which is what brand and program that it may qualify for. So this lamb specifically was an antibiotic-free lamb, and also for this program was also Cascade Creek, which is one of our grass-fed programs in California. It gives you your hot carcass weight, again, yield grade, quality grade, and then all of those projections. So why is that important? And I'm going to keep going back to yield grade and OCC throughout this entire presentation, excuse me. I think this is one of the most powerful slides. This is one of the most powerful graphics you can look at as a sheep producer and truly understand. And if I love webinars, and I'm very glad that we're spending tonight on a webinar, but if we were in person, this is the point in time that I would say, how many of you in this room have actually seen your lambs on the rail? Or for that matter, how many of you have seen a lamb on a rail? And, you know, in a group at a conference, that number is typically pretty low. And so it's pretty funny. And as we've came out with the camera grading and the producer portal, this is the time that I joke around with producers that I know that, you know, everyone says, I have the best lambs in the United States. I can pick on Colorado quite a bit since I'm from Colorado, but I always tease them, and I presented last week and said, you know, it'll be great that the Denver camera is going to be up and running so that next year at convention, you can say all you want that you have the best lambs in Colorado, which ultimately refer to in the United States in their minds. And same goes for anybody on this webinar, and you should have pride in them. But with the camera grading system, we actually see the true value and performance of those lambs. And so if you're getting a kill sheet back that's saying you have, you know, yield grade 4s and 5s, you probably are not producing the best lambs in the United States. Now, they may have other attributes that are the best in the United States, but as far as carcass performance, we're not there. And so what are those targets that we can hit that are more valuable? Because if we think about this and we're looking at that yield grade 2, even versus yield grade 3, and we're looking at over 1.5 pounds difference in trim weight, every single one of those knife strokes cost the industry money. Yes, it starts at the plant level, but it also costs you as a producer. And that's something that we really need to truly be thinking of, is that each of these costs affect us as a whole. We're seeing a year that is great for the lamb market, and we're only coming off of the high of 2020 as far as, like I said, building that demand. But if we're sending, you know, a package of lamb racks that are some yield grade 2s and some yield grade 4s, because that's all that we have available, the customer is not going to be very, very excited with us, nor are they going to be very excited with the price. And on top of it, our production efficiency at the plant level, we look at it the same way that we preach to producers. Our production is not going to be very happy with their efficiencies either. And so that performance that you provide to us flows all the way through. As we look at lambs in the producer portal, we can also compare different carcass traits amongst different lot numbers. So you can compare those specific lots if maybe you should have tried to get a different kill slot, if you should have tried to, you know, harvest those lambs 2 weeks later, whatever it may be. And it's important to look at these and see where those lambs were and understand what lambs went when. But I think even more importantly than comparing among your own lots is exactly what we were talking about with saying that you have the best lambs in the United States. And the cool thing about the producer portal is we can look at outputs and graphics and on exactly that. And so if we're looking at this slide specifically, we're looking at the Dixon facility year to date against producer X year to date. And we can truly compare ourselves on, this is all the lots that he sent in for the year versus all the lots that I went through in the Dixon facility, and see. And in fact, you know, if we look at yield grade, he's just a little bit, producer X is a little bit higher, but not significant. But his OCC is very significant. And I would be very excited to have a, you know, 5% higher OCC. And so that's all sellable red meat. So depending on what his benchmarks and goals are for his operation, that's something to continuously look back at and then compare year over year for their operation. Are they making the right production decisions to continue that? Is it a feed decision? Is it a feedlot decision? And you sent those lambs off and you lucked out and they went at the right time, or they didn't get to go at the right time. So there's all those things to consider in making the best decision for you and ultimately your pocketbook at the end of the day. So coming back to the flock forward feedback loop, we had the camera grading system up and running in Dixon. We had the producer portal started. We had producers starting to look at the producer portal and look at all of this information that I've shared with you, plus some. And we just felt like something was still missing to tie this together. How do we help the sheep industry as a whole, every segment of it, become more efficient and more profitable? Because at the end of the day, we all have to become more profitable for this industry to be viable. And that's when Flock 54, the idea of Flock 54 came about. We started working with the University of Idaho, and in 2019, we officially started Flock 54 under Riley Ag. So if you're not familiar with Flock 54, it is a 1,000K panel that we can provide back single gene traits based on DNA that you send in, simple traits that are disease resistance like OPP, scrapie. We also provide back fecundity or fertility, and we provide several markers back on each of these, especially around fecundity. And we're continuing to improve upon these different gene traits that we provide feedback on or results back on for your flock. Like I said, we've been around since 2019, and in April of this year, we just started version 3 of the panel. And so what I like to compare Flock 54 technology to, or genomics technology, is I want you to think about it like you think about your iPhone. So you just see a commercial, of course, about that time, your iPhone is not taking calls, or you can't hear the person calling you, or they can't hear you. There's just constant problems. And you see all these great things that, let's say the iPhone 11 is just came out. So you're like, okay, I'm going to bite the bullet. I'm going to buy the new iPhone 11. You go, you purchase it. You're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I did this. And then the very next day, you get an ad on Facebook or however they're finding you, and it's like iPhone 12, and here's all the great as, and this is why you're going to want it. It's a better camera. It has better this, and this. And that's essentially what's happening in the genomics world. Technology is moving so incredibly fast. And as long as we can get research done and identify new markers, that is how fast Flock 54 is moving as well. And so just as you get tested with the third panel, we're already working on the fourth panel. And so, you know, we have research studies coming up this fall that we're looking at new markers. We have producers that have been using Flock 54 since 2019 saying, okay, Carissa, this is great that you're providing me this, but I have no idea what this trait is. It doesn't matter to me, to my sheep. But what really matters is if I compare fecundity markers with milk production. So can we identify milk production in my sheep? And so that's truly how this technology is moving. We also provide back parentage verification. And to me, and what this talk is about tonight, truly is around that parentage verification and matching sires and dams, but specifically for tonight's purpose, sires back to individual lambs. We're able to have single generation change as we test your ewe lambs, and you know if you want to actually keep a replacement ewe lamb all the way in the lambing jug in comparison to the fall and how they grew out, and different decisions such as that. So how does it work? Well, the producer, again, it always starts with the producer, would collect DNA. So samples, whether it's tissue coming from an earmark and you put it in a Ziploc baggie, or you are docking tails and you put that in a Ziploc baggie and send it to us, or you're using a tissue sample unit and sending it to us in a vial, or you're collecting blood. From there, you are sending it to Superior Farms. Our lab is extracting the DNA, excuse me. We're genotyping that DNA, and we're getting SNPs from that, which is essentially going back to your biology days that you probably don't remember anything other than there were some A, C, T's, and G's that had to be paired up, and they could only be in a certain order, and they could only pair up one versus the other. And again, you still don't need to know this, even when you're sending in DNA for Flock 54, because we convert all of those A, C, T's, and G's into the SNP markers that are actually important and you care about, like scrapie and parentage. And then ultimately that data goes back to you. The way the data goes back to you is currently in this reporting format. So essentially right now you'll be getting back a Excel file with your parentage results as well as your genotyping results. Again, this fall we're working on a producer portal similar to what we use for the camera grading system, but if you're part of a breed registry and you want the registry to be able to access your data, they will have a login and they'll be able to access that. If you want to be able to transfer an animal, somebody buys a ram from you that's been Flock 54 tested, we're able to transfer that data into their genotyping database, as well as you're just able to see everything that you've ever submitted, because whether you submitted in 2019 on version 1 or you're submitting right now on version 3 of the panel, we have a database of everything that you've ever sent in. And so if you send in rams in 2019 and you're still using those rams today, we're able to go back on that and provide parentage verification on the offspring from those rams forever, as long as you're still using them. So when we, again, go back to this feedback loop and understand that we're able to take EID technology, take Flock 54 technology, genotyping and parentage, as well as utilizing data software, the most important things that come from this feedback loop, and again, it starts with the producer, and it can be with Superior Farms and your producer partner, or it can be however works best in your system. If you're harvesting your own lambs, you should be collecting carcass data so you understand that performance, and you can validate your sire carcass or your sire performance, whether that's looking at carcass data or looking at the goals that are important to you and why you're buying the rams that you're buying. From our perspective, the two most important things coming from the Flock Forward program is Flock 54 certified flocks. So you'll be seeing this a lot more as we have a lot of seed stock producers involved. Ultimately, Flock 54 was created with the commercial producer in mind. But as we've progressed over the last 2.5 years, we've really seen a purpose and different markers for every segment of the industry. And so whether you're a commercial producer, you're a seed stock producer, farm flock, or even the club lamb industry, we've found different traits, and we're really trying to help you get the best genotypes back to you and make Flock 54 viable to you. But ultimately, Flock 54 certified will be that you are free of, you're not a carrier of any disease traits within your flock. And then also, to me, and this is where it gets cool, this is where I get excited, is validating that sire performance. So that's where we're going to move from here. So when we take, this was a study done over 2 years time, and I have 2 different producer examples. This is 2 commercial operations, and we tested all the rams, all of their ewe lambs and wethers, and the wethers went through the plant. So I'll specify if it's just representative of the wethers or wethers and replacement ewe lambs. Obviously, any of the carcass data is just the wethers going through. But we took all of the carcass data from the camera and split that out into these important carcass traits. So as you can see, we have different average hog carcass weights. I just wanted to show you this graphic. It's not as important when we're not comparing it back to a live weight. And when we brought these lambs into the harvest facility, we did not individually weigh these lambs. So we just have hot carcass weight. There's a lot of cool things that we could have done if we would have done individual live weight, but it's still important to see, looking across the bottom, R1 through R36 are obviously all the representative rams and the differences we had there. When we go back and we think about the 2 most important traits for carcass, obviously yield grade is 1, and we look across here and we can definitely see some outliers. Again, remember, we want a low yield grade. So the outlier here in ram 10, we're not quite sure if we want that or not, but I would say that yield grade is a little too high. So we're looking more at, there's a lot of rams across here, but we're looking at more ram 16 would probably be more preferred. And as we look at this and the OCC, now these outliers that are high, those high bars, ram 3, ram 22, those are the sheep that we want. We want a lot more sires. So you want to go back, look at your records and say, where did ram 3 come from? Where did ram 22 come from? And then go back and compare that OCC and yield grade and make sure that it's true, the attributes that you want. But more importantly than this is how many that sire actually produced. And this is where I think Flock 54 helps us so much. We go to a ram sale and we buy rams based on whatever merit you purchase them on. And you've heard the story before, and you group mate your ewes, you pull those rams out. The ones that do not look like they are doing good, they hard doing, you don't want to feed them over the winter because the feed bill is going to be too astronomical to get them back to go to breed again one more season. So you get rid of them. And what you find out is they're the ones that did all the work. They're ram 21, they're ram 28 and 29, who have 22, 23, and 24 lambs. And again, on this slide, what's significant is this commercial producer and this set of lambs. This is where the rams were turned out, and it is ewe lambs as well as wethers. So it is not just a subset of ewes representative offspring. This is the sheep. And so what value does ram 3, ram 13, half of the rams in this graph represent the onesie twosies? How much are they actually worth to you? Probably not $1,000 if you're spending that at a ram sale. And I think that's really important. And one thing that I wanted to mention in talking about the tools that we have available through our producer program, and thinking about Flock 54, thinking about the camera grading system, and then mentioning what rams you're buying, especially as we're coming up into ram sale season. Spencer is this week. We still have a lot of ram sales in the West coming up as well. Is you really need to think about the tools and technology that are available to you. In a perfect world, in the beef industry, they learned this. You can't choose just one tool over another. And so I really want to mention that as we're progressing on this and this project, there's very big potential for estimating breeding values coming out of this with the university that we did this study with, and looking at carcass EBVs. But in a perfect world, the technology you should be utilizing is a combination of both. This is not a not a competitive tool against NSIP and their estimated breeding values, their genomically enhanced EBVs. This is a tool that can be used in unison. And if you want the best results and you want genetic progress, this is me saying, and you would hear it from NSIP folks as well. In a perfect world, you would be utilizing both NSIP EBVs and a genomics tools such as Flock 54. They don't have to necessarily say Flock 54. I would like them to, but they don't have to. That's just my shameless plug, obviously. But in a perfect world, don't think of them as competing technologies. Think of them as technologies that work together. And so I did want to mention that. I meant to mention it a few slides back, but just as we are talking about rams and sire performance, it's very important that you understand that utilizing all technologies available to you obviously would give you the best results, but you have to decide what goals you have for your operation. So what gets me excited looking at this data, again, and this is the same data, is actually looking at number of lambs sired on top of that OCC yield. And so if we look at the outlier for the best OCC yield, that's only based on one lamb that went through harvest. So that's not very good. Same situation here. So the two outliers, the ones that we would actually want to keep around, this is again why we go back to parentage verification and truly understand that those rams, for whatever reason, only produced 2 lambs or 1 lamb. And they gave us the best carcass performance. But at the end of the day, they didn't change our world. They didn't change our pocketbook because that's only representative of 3 lambs across this entire group. And the same situation when we're looking at when we're looking at OCC yield versus average yield grade by sire. This is truly the graph. This is the slide of the night that I think is the most important as we look at this. The one in green, Ram 3, we're looking at that. That's a 70% OCC. That's huge. And if we look at the scale of this, 64%, there's not a single ram in this study that the producer should be upset about as far as carcass performance and OCC, because 64% and up is huge. I would start to worry if there was something under 50% OCC. But for this case and for this producer, their boneless closely trimmed retail cuts or OCC is there's nothing even to worry about there. But yield grade does get a little concerning. And again, that can come back to days on feed, what they were being fed, etc. So we have to look at that with a grain of salt. But the red triangles are the ones that, I think would be less desirable. The one in green and the one in blue are some more desirable sires that I would keep in mind when looking at what can be most important to you. And again, improving your profitability at the end of the day. Here we're looking at the sires that produced the most lambs in this study. And so that's Ram 6, Ram 21, Ram 28, and 29. And again, when we look across this, the OCC, like I said, there's nothing in here that I would be upset about if I had this ram in my operation. It was providing me with this OCC. Ultimately, through the producer portal and through Superior Farms, you're going to be getting paid, and not necessarily a premium, but you're not going to be getting discounted on these carcass attributes. And then we're looking across the average yield grade, and they're a little bit higher than we would want. They're still going to hit a 2, but they're getting awfully close to that yield grade 3. Again, this was the same study, but a different producer, and we had the exact same scenario with a number of lambs by sire. And so this one is actually even worse. The 1s and 2s that were produced, and there's a lot of sires involved in this. That would be pretty scary if these were the rams that I had and ready to go back out, kick out with my ewes, because you just don't even know what you're going to get. And as we think about some of the most important things happening in our industry, we really want to improve upon our lambing percentage. And we can see here that this is clearly a problem when the ram that produced the most is only at 17 lambs. So we looked at this graph just a little bit different, but again, it's the same scenario. Again, that's dependent upon what the live weight is. And then your average yield grade to be fairly low. Really targeting that yield grade 2. And so you can look across here for sire performance and number of lambs and decide what ram fits your operation the best. But to me, utilizing Flock 54, especially as a commercial producer, you're not going to want to probably test all 4,000 of your ewes or 1,000 of your ewes. But if you can start with a Flock 54 certified ram and then test those offspring and then take them to the plant, or you collect the carcass data yourself, I think this is ultimately what can make a change in if you're making the right decision based on the parameters you have for those sires. Because look at rams when they come out of the ewes and think we know what has happened. We can say that they are the best rams that we ever had, but until we actually see true carcass performance, we don't know that they're actually doing the job that we want them to do. And so I think this is a pretty exciting time. Like I said, from this study, we were looking at the idea of carcass estimated breeding values. Again, in a perfect world, if we pair this with NSIP's EBVs, it gets even more exciting, and you can make decisions fairly easy when you have all of that information provided for you on rams and making that decision. So with that, I will open it up for questions. I hope I covered everything fairly well, but we'll see what kind of questions you guys have tonight.
Okay, great. I will start sharing some of the questions with you. The first question is, how does the system track lambs back to the producer when they go through a feedlot?
That they do, but the person that would be on the producer portal is actually the feedlot. And so what we would have set up is if you're selling to a feeder or you're custom feeding, obviously if you're custom feeding at a feedlot, you would still have access to that, but it's actually whoever is selling to Superior Farms, let's say. And so if you're sending to the feedlot, they bought your lambs and they're sending through Superior, you just have to ask them, and we've had a lot of producers do this, ask for that lot information back. And that's why it's so important when you're going through that traditional system that you are the one putting the EID tags in, because then they can scan them as they come into the feedlot. They can provide extra performance indicators and growth, etc., on those lambs back to you as well. Cost of feed. We did see a study done by a producer himself. He just tested some things out last year among feeders, and then we looked at carcass data through the portal as he had permission from all of the feedlots to access his lambs. And so that's really important to, obviously, wherever you send your lambs or whoever buys your lambs, to really create that relationship with them so that you can access that data. Because once your lambs are sold to a feeder, they are the ones that have access to that information.
Okay, great. The next question is have the flaws in Flock 54 been resolved when properly identifying sires of offspring?
The flaws of Flock 54. I hope I'm answering this question, and if not, have a follow-up for me, I'm sorry. But so we did have a few issues with in the beginning with some of the sires not matching up, but we have since, with version 3, fixed it to where our management software allows us to look among different producers. And I wouldn't say that it was a flaw with the genomic panel. It was a flaw with some of the entries. So complete human error, and the understanding of, one submission form, and this comes back to Superior as well. So I'm not putting the blame on producers, but one submission form coming in as producer X, and then their next submission form coming in as ABC Farms. And so our system was not recognizing the ABC Farms and producer X were the same person, and so it wasn't testing against those. Whether the submission form said that, or, like I said, clerical error, Carissa put in ABC Farms one time and producer X the next. But now our management software for parentage allows us to test across all producers, and we're able to identify those sires. The other thing that has came up in the past is you have to understand that if you have multiple rams out with your ewes, there is a possibility that just because you have twins does not mean that those twins came from the same ram. And so we have had, question marks pulled up by producers and saying like, no, these are twins. This has to come out of sire 1, 2, 3 or sire 4, 5, 6. It cannot be that one is out of one and one is out of the other. And so that is actually something that we've had to prove several times. There's a lot of studies out about that, but that is something. And so of the two, complaints, or in the year that I've been there and understanding some of the flaws that producers have seen, those are the two that I'm most familiar with. And I apologize if I didn't cover your question, but if there's more clarification, let me know.
Carissa, can you talk a little bit how individuals can use Flock 54 that maybe aren't directly marketing to Superior, but how they can use the program and send in samples and such, even maybe for their breeding stock as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I would actually say, like I said, initially Flock 54 was created with the commercial industry in mind. And even as a commercial producer, I still think there's a lot of relevance, especially around that idea of Flock 54 certification and being disease susceptibility free, carrier free of those important diseases. Um, and understanding your fecundity, whether it be Borrelia, GDF9, or a marker to still be discovered specific to your breed. But identifying those and knowing that you have no problems with your flock, I think that's really important. And we've actually had a lot of seed stock producers and a lot of heritage breeds that have picked up on Flock 54 testing because of exactly that. They want to know that they're disease free, and they want to keep track of that, and they want to keep track of their genetics essentially and understanding everything that's happening. And so we do have several generations of some producers in there. They're also utilizing Flock 54 in our database as a way to keep track of their registry. So there are several different, and again, this at this point is a couple different heritage breeds, but they're truly utilizing us as their database. Their registry has access to everything, and we'll just use the Velaeus black nose as an example as they're bringing in all of these genetics into the US. They're all going back to essentially, one or two sires back in New Zealand. And so one person is paying for that DNA to be tested from New Zealand, and then they're all testing against that to prove that they do have 100% Velaeus black nose. And so there's several different ways that we can look at that. I would love to sit down and talk to you about what your genetic priorities are or what you want to see happen in your flock. And I think that's really important, in that I can talk all day about the different exciting things that Flock 54 is bringing. But until I talk to you individually and know what your goals are with your flock and what you've done in the past and how you want to move forward, then we can actually talk about what's most important on the panel currently and different studies or different markers that we need to identify to help you as well. And like I said, both panel version 2 and version 3, every change that has been made on those two panels has come specifically from conversations that I have had, or Lisa Eidman, that was previously in this role, has had with producers and saying, I really don't care about this marker being on there. I don't even know what it means. And that can be true, and there may be several of those for your specific breed. But this is what I want, and we will do everything in our power in partnership with the University of Idaho, who have been great partners and on several different research studies and grants. And we will work to see if we can secure funds and grants to provide exactly that back to you and have that on the panel available for the industry. And so it is so important that we collaborate in that way. I spend a lot of my day on the phone talking to producers exactly about this. And that's the most beneficial way that we can move Flock 54 forward. But that is also the most benefit to you as a producer, that I'd love to hear about your sheep. I'd love to hear about your operation. And then from there, we can determine why Flock 54 will work for you, what is best, and what to expect when you send in that DNA. You'll find that if you go to flock54.com, you will not find a submission form to send in DNA. You will not find an example of results. You will not find a lot of instructions on there, because you'll find my email address or my phone number, or you will click to submit a contact submission that will have you talk to me. And that's because we really think that it's truly important to have those initial conversations with individuals on why you're Flock 54 testing and what's most important to you with your flock.
Another question that's come in is, can you talk about the cost of Flock 54 per animal, the turnaround time on results, if you're looking for certain results in a certain time frame, and then also where do you get the information to submit samples?
Yes. To submit samples, you can either contact me directly. We also sell the Allflex TSUs, so tissue sample units. So you can either email me directly, call me directly, or go to the Flock 54 website and submit a contact submission, which will ultimately go to me. And you can order TSUs through me and or ask for a submission form. That you'll also get the full list of traits that we report back to you and the cost. The cost for Flock 54 testing is $20 per head currently. And we do have discounts for NSIP producers as well as our producer partners. Again, like I said earlier, in a perfect world, if you're utilizing both a genomics program as well as NSIP and EBVs, we think that's really important. So we do offer NSIP discounts, and that would ultimately be the same as being a producer partner of ours. And so as we continuously work with our third-party lab and work with our partners on creating the panel, ultimately we want to get that down as cost effective as we possibly can, and we would really like to get it down closer to $10 to $12 a head. Currently we just it's not possible with the shipping that we do to the lab and the cost of the lab itself. Essentially at this point we are at break even, so we really are trying to keep it as economical for the producer as we possibly can, and just basically paying shipping from our facility to the lab is any of the extra money off of testing. So we do cover that for NSIP producers and producer partners. But you can just contact me, and again, in that initial conversation, we talk about if you're an NSIP producer, if you're a producer partner with Superior Farms, and you would ultimately know what the cost is, but it would be no more than $20 a head.
And what's the turnaround time on the testing results?
Oh, yes. We have moved over the last year to submission dates. So that is something that you can find on the Flock 54 website, or again, contact me directly. Throughout the early months of the year, January through May, we're basically sending samples to the lab every week. We have to have 400 samples going to the lab at once. That's what it takes to run the panel. And if we're not sending in 400 samples, we're ultimately wasting reactions of the panel. But like I said, we're essentially sending once a week or once every 2 weeks at least 400 samples. As we've moved into the summer months, and I've now been here a full calendar year, so I've went through 2 Julys, I guess. It does slow down. So we're sending about in July we sent twice this month, but it was at the very, very beginning of the month, and we will be sending technically August 2nd, this second set. So it really does slow down. So if you have something, you have a RAM sale that you need this data for, you have a show coming up, really make sure to reach out or look on the Flock 54 website on when that next submission date is, because from the time that you send in the DNA and that submission date says August 2nd, you will probably not see your data back until around the 16th. It's about 14 days. It has gotten a little bit faster over the last month. We're probably sitting closer to 10 days, but I always say 14 days just in case. The lab gives us back, again, those SNPs, and then we have to convert everything. And sometimes I don't get that data back until 8 o'clock at night, and then I have to spend my next morning getting it done. And so I push as hard as I can to get it as quickly back to you. But one, if you have a deadline, I will obviously put priority to get yours done first in the lot. And also we can sometimes ask the lab to speed it up. But I've had a lot of questions in the last 2 weeks because of this, and only sending in on the 2nd this month, or coming up in August. And they've asked if they can pay extra to get it quicker. That's, unfortunately, the lab can't do that with the way this technology is. Again, we have to have at least 400 samples to make it worthwhile on those reactions. So just kind of expect 2 weeks from the day you send it in for that submission.
I'm going to do one more question here and then we'll wrap it up. We try to stay at about an hour on these webinars. The last question is, I have a 50U flock of seed stock Texels. I purchased NSIP rams or the UK system, previously Basco. How do you interact with those information sources, and is Flock 54 practical in this situation?
We don't have a lot of Texels currently tested, but again, it would be most important that you called, told me what your goals are with your flock. What are you striving to improve upon year over year genetically? What are you looking at to change or anything like that? And let's talk through that, and we can think of a genetic improvement plan for you. And talking through what Flock 54 results are. That essentially for Texels and different breed associations or registries, or however those work, a lot of that comes from the producer wanting that group to be involved or the association to be involved, and that's how it starts. But once that conversation is started, the association and I can take it from there, and that's truly how it started with a lot of the other associations, and especially around the idea of parentage verification and registration. So again, I would just encourage anybody that has questions like that. I know that's not completely answering your question, but just to give me a call and let's talk one-on-one. I think that's really important, and understanding what your goals are.
All right, just for everybody who is still joining us, this will be archived on the association's website, suffolks.org, so you can go back and look at any of the slides that maybe you want to look at a little more closely or refer to, or if you have questions, you can contact Carissa, and she has displayed her email and phone number to get in contact with her with any specific questions on any of the content that was shared this evening. With that, I think we're going to bring this to a close. Thank you so much, Carissa, for joining us and speaking with us tonight. Thank you for all of our viewers, either through Zoom or Facebook. And we invite you to our next Suffolk U webinar coming this fall. More details will be posted as that comes closer in time. And with that, we'll call it a night. Thank you so much for joining us and have a good evening.
Thanks, everyone.